Teachers and professors have read it. What's the best answer you've gotten on an exam that wasn't technically wrong? English teacher in Japan. The students were to finish the sentence, "I can't stand," and someone wrote, "I can't stand on water." Another day and still no Japanese Jesus. One day we will find him. In an intro bio lab quiz, I asked my students to define bilateral symmetry. One student simply drew an arrow and wrote, "See reverse." On the back of the quiz was an extremely ornate and intricate drawing of Chewbacca. 10/10 quality. Running down the middle of Chewbacca was a dotted line. Full points. Man, I was hoping to hear that the student had drawn another arrow and written, "Datus reverie yes." My wife is an elementary school teacher, and she actually has a Word document of her favorite answers to test and homework questions. One that stands out the most to me was an answer to a homework question. The kids were practicing their 2's times tables and the question said something along the lines of, "John lives in his house with his mom, dad, brother, and grandpa. How many total hands do the people in John's house have altogether?" The answer they were looking for was 10, and they wanted the students to show that 2 times 5 is equal to 10. This young man instead wrote, "Not enough information. We don't know if anyone in the family lost a hand." He wasn't wrong. My wife just wrote, "Good thinking," on his assignment, and gave him full credit. The kid was bright and knew his times tables, so that wasn't an issue. He just wanted to think outside the box. We don't know whether his grandpa was a non-vet. Correctly me if I'm wrong, but after watching Forrest Gump I'm pretty sure that people only lost their legs in Nam. Student teaching and was finishing up the World War II unit with a test. One of the final questions was about Japanese internment camps and asked if the Japanese Americans ever received reparations and if so, what were they? The answer in yes. In the late 80s surviving victims received $20,000. While the students were taking their tests, one asked me, "Mr. K, what are reparations?" I was a little busy with other questions so I said, "Like payback." The student nods and starts writing. Next week I was grading these and got to his. For his answer he wrote, "The Japanese did receive reparations in the form of the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki." I laughed but realized this was mostly my fault and gave him partial credit and an explanation after class the next day. Chemistry test. Why shouldn't you smoke at a petrol station? You might get cancer. My wife is a human biology teacher and her favorite one was, "Name a form of contraception, dildo." Not mine but my mom's, who is a science teacher. She had a written response question on one theoretical way we would deal with a large amount of mosquitoes transmitting diseases to people, and she had a kid reply with, "If we kill all the people then the mosquitoes won't be able to transmit diseases to them." In a class that was trying to teach future teachers how to write a test, we were given a test that was so poorly written that instead of answering the questions, I corrected it and turned it. One of my proudest smartass moments where I played it off to the instructor as, "I thought that is what you wanted us to do with this." Student here, but on a hydrogeology exam, we had to write a short essay on, "Why is liquefaction a problem?" I put, "Because, in general, buildings are not designed to float." I got full credit. When my dad took general chemistry in college, the class was incredibly full, so his lab section ended up being taught in a humanities building across campus that didn't have things like emergency showers. The first day, they got a lecture about lab safety and were assigned to write up what you would do if your classmate spilled acid on himself. My dad, being a smartass, instead wrote up what he would actually have to do. First, haul the screaming victim down to the campus bus stop. Wait calmly for the shuttle to the science quad. Try to quiet the victim so that he does not alarm other passengers, etc. Year 4 Maths. Last question on first page. Circle the odd numbers. Kid also circled the page number below the list of numbers. Extra point awarded. Had to take my second year of biomedicine uni exams while on chemo and had a bad chest infection. The painkillers they gave me were awesome. I was high as a kite. I was doing the human anatomy paper and there was a question about digestion and I wrote a story about how someone ate some cake and its adventure through their body until it finally reached a shitty end. One question asked us to describe a cancer treatment and its effects on the body. So I went into great detail about my last chemo session. The hour-long wait for treatment, the sickly yellow of the ward, how much I would vomit if they gave me the wrong anti-sickness tablet, the ways the drugs were administered and how much it fucking hurt my veins, how and why my wee would be red afterwards, how old people would talk at me, telling me I shouldn't have cancer, during treatment at the ward. Somehow I knew all the drug names and what they did, and then went through the day by day of the 14 days of side effects between treatments, and the long-term effects too. Ended it off with something about chemo sucks major ass and I'm all bald now, would not repeat. Then I drew hedgehogs for the rest of the time. I have no idea what the person marking it must have thought, but it was the only exam I passed that week. Design exam in an engineering course. Kids had to analyze a hairdryer design, i.e. wattage, airflow, etc. Final part. What is wrong with this design? I think it was something like the elements are laid out in totally the wrong angle and efficiency is fucked because of it. The best answer was, it doesn't have enough power. It needs more power, because more is more. With enough power you can ignore efficiency. Statistics test said, you roll a die. What are the chances a 1, 2, or 3 are rolled? I put, it depends how many sides the die has, and then I put the percentage for 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, and 20-sided dice. I got 0 points because, too many incorrect answers. Dice only have 6 sides. I even petitioned it and lost. Fuck my school. The course material always stated and clarified, a fair 6-sided die, but the test said, you roll a die. The test did not state how many sides the die had or that it was a fair 6-sided die, and I was going to a short D&D session right after I took my test. I did overthink the question, but no specification on the test, and having a bag of polyhedral dice in my backpack next to me didn't help. The math department head told me that I should have assumed it was always going to be 6 sides, even though I showed him my bag of dice and stated that it was never clarified. Still passed my test in class, but it still irks me, just based on technicality. In 7th grade I had an English test in which we were supposed to choose between 2 poems and explain why one was a good poem and one was a bad poem. We'd covered those exact poems in class, so I knew the right answer, but chose the bad poem as the good one and wrote about how poetry is art, and art is subjective, and so I preferred the bad one. I was 13 and in my feels. I failed the test, which on one hand I suppose I deserved, but on the other hand still annoys me 20 years later. On an religious education exam, a student just put, "It is God's will," on all the answers. Reminds me of an Ask Reddit response from a while ago, which I unfortunately cannot find, about a teacher who would accept Jesus as a partial credit answer for any question, because Jesus is always the answer. My physics teacher once showed me one of his favorite answers. One time he had a test asking something like, "You're a city planner, in charge of designing roads. Concrete has a friction coefficient of 1.0 when dry, and 0.5 when wet. Asphalt has a friction coefficient of 0.75 when dry, and 0.6 when wet. What should you make roads out of?" He was looking for asphalt because it's more dangerous when it's wet out, thus giving you better control in dangerous situations, or concrete because it's better when dry, and most of the time dry conditions are present. Some guy just wrote asphalt because it's cheaper. Early primary school biology test. What is the name for a male cow? Answer: Bruce. On a maths paper with the question, Tom and Dave play a game with a 6-sided spinner. Tom spins the spinner 200 times. These are the results: 1 to 32 to 32. Is this fair? He replied no, he didn't let Dave have a go. Question: what changes could you implement to make the heating device more efficient at increasing the temperature of the water? Answer: heat the water during the day so the warmth from the sun also contributes to heating the water. Move the heating device closer to the equator, where ambient temperatures are typically higher. My dad told me a tale of a question on, I think, a physics test that asked, "How can you find the height of a building using a barometer?" The correct answer had something to do with measuring the pressure at the top of the building and the bottom of the building, and then doing some math to figure it out. The supposed student gave 2 answers. 1. Tie a rope around the barometer and hang it off the building. Measure the rope afterwards and you have the height of the building. 2. Go to the janitor and say, "Hey, I'll give you this nice barometer if you tell me the height of this building." Not me, but a friend. She gave an essay-type exam to 4th graders regarding bees and environment. The question was, what would be the impact if bees would go extinct? A student wrote, if bees would go extinct, if teacher asks us to bring a bee to school, we wouldn't be able to bring one. My friend once answered a question on a bio test about how to get rid of termites in your attic, or something like that, and his response was to burn the house down. He got the points. Can I submit my own answer? Organic chemistry. Question was, how many different configurations are there for a particular molecule? The question said, list all 7, but I could only come up with 6. I figured I'm gonna lose a point anyway, may as well be entertaining, so I wrote, it's a trap, and doodled the crappy little Admiral Akbar. Turns out, it was a trick. There were only 6 conformers and I was the only one who got it right. For chemistry. How do you prevent an iron fence from oxidizing? My answer, send it to space. Full points. Student here. When I was in high school, for biology we dissected a fetal pig. On the test we had afterwards, one of the questions was something like, why do the lungs not function properly? And I simply wrote, it's dead, got the mark. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.